Hey, Cameron Yates here, and on this episode of Remodeling America, I'm going to walk through how to change the shutoff valves behind your vanity, behind your toilet if you're going to replace it. So, hope you enjoy. So, we've already removed the vanity on this job, and what I always like to do is I always like to replace the shutoff valves behind it. It's dependent on how old the house is, but this one in particular is probably about 30 years old, so they've been there for 30 years. And it's really just a good idea. You already have access to it. You might as well change those old twisting knobs, shutoff valves out with some quarter-turn shutoff valves. So on this one in particular, I'll kind of show you what we're dealing with here. So if you look in on the pipes themselves, you'll see you've got some corrosion here. You've got a lot of excess. You got some dirt. I mean, these are also the ones that take a lot to turn. Sometimes they don't tighten all the way. These ones in particular aren't leaking, but all the time I see on these they end up leaking. So pretty much after you get your vanity out, you can inspect them just to kind of double check. But I pretty much always replace them. These are copper pipe with sweat on valves, shutoff valves. So there's these two for the vanity, and then there's this one down here for the toilet, and it's pretty much the same setup. Okay, but this one isn't a sweat on. This is actually compression fit. But we'll do the same thing. We'll replace these because we already have access to it, and it just makes sense that way. So, you want to obviously after you remove the vanity and you know you want to replace them, you go ahead and make sure that you don't need the water in the house anymore, and go ahead and turn the water off to the house. Usually there's a shut off in the house, or you can do it at the street if you feel like it. After that, you want to make sure you drain the water out of your line. So I usually take the lowest faucet or tub, whatever's the lowest level, if there's a basement or a first floor, and I open that, and then I open the one on the top level. So what you'll do is you'll get all the water to drain out all the lines. Make sure you open the hot and the cold. So after you have all the water drained out of the lines, you'll know that there's only going to be just a little bit of water left in here, and there shouldn't be any pressure. Okay, so I usually just leave those lines open, and then you can open these, and you usually hear just a little bit of air that comes out. And that's just that water that was in that line draining out that bottom drain. So we kind of create a little bit of a suction there. So I just kind of open those all the way. So open slowly just in case. Okay, and we're good. We do the same thing here. There's a couple ways we can take off these valves. Now these are sweat-on valves, so we'll have to cut the copper pipe behind it. Luckily we've got a decent amount. We've got about 2 inches or so before it gets to the wall. But there's a whole lot of slag buildup and lead from when they soldered it the first time. Not the biggest fan of going back with sweat-on valves. I prefer compression fit valves. They're a little bit easier, and if you ever have problems, it's a little bit easier to change them out as well. You don't have to keep cutting pipe. Another option is, instead of cutting this pipe, we could sweat these off, right? So we could heat these up and get them to a little bit more, just to like another temperature. Let's say we don't have a lot of copper left here. If we were right up against the wall and we didn't have any extra copper here, then the idea is to sweat them off. So basically we take a torch, heat these fittings off, and then we could just pull them off. That's another way of doing it. On this one, I'm just gonna cut them off. Okay, so normally I would attempt to use I could use the pipe cutter, but this one's a little bit big. I don't have the small one with me, and I have to get so close to the wall just to get away from all this built up solder that instead of just sitting here trying to sand it down and get it a little bit closer over here, I'm just going to use a Dremel to actually cut these. So you can use a hacksaw, you can use a Dremel, you can use whatever. So on this particular one, I got a Dremel, and I've got one of these little easy lock metal cut-off wheels on it. So I'm going to try this one out, and I haven't cut any of these yet, so we're going to give it a shot. I always recommend using some eye protection, so I'm going to put on these goggles. Safety first. Alright, let me see what we've got here. I always like to have a little drop cloth down, another little cloth, just in case there is some excess water that comes out. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this knob off here first to give me a little bit of access for it. So I'm going to grab a screwdriver for that. Alright, so I'm going to take these shutoff valves off just to give me a little bit better access. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty for these. And I always usually take them off if we're leaving these shutoff valves and putting another vanity in, because then I only have to cut a smaller hole. But on this one we're taking these off, so I don't really care what happens to the handles themselves. So those just screw off, and then let's go ahead and try cutting this again. Alright, there's one. Let's get the other one. Alright, I got them off. I'm just going to get a nice little square edge on them, so I'm going to use the same wheel just to give me a nice flat spot on there, because I got a little jagged. So I'm going to clean it up some. Alright, good to go. Those look a lot better. So next thing I do is I have to take these off. I never obviously replace these. They're all just rusted and they always look like garbage. You always have a couple of options for putting them back on. You can do a split flange after the fact. So let's say you're cutting out holes in the back of your vanity and you want to have a small setup. Sometimes I'll even just keep these off. I'll clean them up, keep them this tight, and then put my compression fit shutoff valves on, so I have a really small hole in the back, and the flange covers everything really nicely. But if not, it's only about 1.25 inches of hole that you have to drill in the back of your vanity if you have the shutoff valve on there without the handle. So what you can do is if you wanted to do put your vanity on first and then your shutoff valve on, then you can use one of these plates, one of these flanges. So these are just a solid flange, and they just slide right on top of this. All right, they just slide right over this and go way up against the wall. They're solid all the way around. There's another option called a split flange. Now, a split flange is what if you wanted to put the shutoff valve on and then put the vanity in place, you wouldn't be able to slide this over the shutoff valve. So it's called split flange. It's got a small little hairline pre-cut like crack in it, and all you have to do is pull back on that, and you can actually wrap it around the pipe so that you don't actually have to slide it on, and it looks pretty much about the same. So those are better for retrofitting. We'll just use the regular solid ones to slide on. So I'll get both of these guys off. All right. So whenever you're attaching anything to copper, or any pipe really, it needs to be clean. And we want to get that nice shine back too. I don't want all this the green just oxidation on the pipes. So a couple things you can use. You can use sandpaper. I like to clean the insides out too with these hard bristle brushes. Just get a nice clean everywhere. There's also the hard bristle brushes that go on the outside as well. They actually screw. You just go one way. And these things work pretty well. They work a little bit better for newer pipes for me because it just kind of gives you that better surface for the solder to kind of fit into. But another option is you can just use some 120 mesh. This can be used in wet or dry, and it's specifically made for these pipes. So you can just take this, and it's like magic, see? And it takes all that extra little solder off of there, and I mean the difference between that and that is just completely different. And I just commented all the angles, so I did do this side, and then you can do this side, kind of like the cartoons when the cartoons are cleaning themselves with their towels, right? That's always what it reminds me of. All right, and then make sure you get the bottom. Just get everything off of there, make sure it's nice and clean. Get all that little solder off too, as much as you can. Alright, and that looks pretty good. And also I like to clean the insides too, because we've got them off, we might as well. There we go, just get that last little garbage that's in there. If there was any solder that kind of leaked in there before, but it looks pretty good. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing to the other pipe. And I got this little bit of, so if you can look down under here, you'll see that there's this little bit of copper left on the bottom of the pipe. So it's not perfectly round. So you just gotta do a little extra work to make sure you get all of that stuff off of there. So either you cut it a little further down, or you just have to do a little bit more sanding to get all of that excess lead off of that copper. Or I guess it's not really lead, it's lead-free solder, so I guess there's no lead in it. It could be. I don't think they were still using it in '85. Go. Okay. So that's nice, it came out good. Sometimes you'd want to use a reamer if you really had to, which takes off this outside edge, bevels it a little bit to make it easier for the other piece to slide on. But if your shutoff valve slides right on, you don't really have to worry about it. So we're going to be using these with a 1/2 inch by 3/8. 1/2 inch talks about the pipe size, so, and then 3/8 is the fitting that goes to the supply line. And these are all quarter turn. It'd be hard for us to not find shutoff valves that aren't quarter turn nowadays. So these are the ones we like to use. So the hole on the back of my vanity is actually pretty open. So I'm just gonna put these on because it goes right through the vanity. It's kind of sealed off on the back here, so we can go ahead and set these on now. And how these work is you screw this piece off, and inside you'll see this little brass compression fitting. So you put this nut on, it fits on just nice, and then this is where you'll see if you'll need that reamer or not. It's the same on both sides, so you can't really put it on wrong, okay? Slide this on, and it slides on just fine. And then you want to make sure you put this on as far as it'll go in, which is about 5/16 to kind of 3/8. Make sure that's nice and tight. And then you want to make sure that this is straight up and down, because if you don't get it that way at first, it'll frustrate you. It'll at least frustrate your anal friends if they go down there, or some anal plumber that comes in and takes a look at your work. So make sure it's straight up and down, and then you just kind of hand tighten it for a little bit. Make sure that you still push the shutoff valve in so that it doesn't come off from that, from all the way on top of there. Now, what you need to do is now that you've hand tightened, you've got it in place, you need to finish this off, and to get that compression seal in there nice and tight. And what you'll do is on the sides of these are squared, and it's squared like that on purpose. It's so that adjustable wrench fits right there, so that it can hold it in place, so you don't have to worry about holding in with your hand. And you just keep that on there to hold it straight up and down, and then you start to turn the other one. the same way you were turning it a second ago, but now you've got a little extra help. These need to be relatively tight. Couldn't tell you exactly, but I will say that I usually over tighten just to make sure. You can also use some pipe dope on these threads if you want to get them a little bit snugger. I didn't put any on these. Okay, so that is nice and snug. Most supply lines now are actually the stainless steel metal braided ones, and they come with this fitting on here. This is another compression fitting that comes with it, and if you wanted to use it, you can, but I never install. I don't think anybody installs those kinds of supply lines anymore, so unfortunately it just ends up becoming trash. But that is good. And then you look down in there, you'll see straight up and down is on, over is off. So as soon as you install it, just so you don't forget, always put it in the off position so that you don't turn the water on without realizing. So pretty much do the exact same thing for the other side. So whenever you're hooking up your faucet, just always remember, as long as there's actually a couple places in this house in particular, they got them backwards, but 99% of the time your hot supply is going to be on the left side and your cold is going to be on the right side. So same for the valves on your faucet itself. So just keep that in mind. There we go. That slips on nice. Okay, that's good. Same thing. Nice and straight up and down. Tighten these up. Keep it pushed in there. There it is. My trusty adjustable wrenches. And get it in there. Here we go. And tighten these up the same way you just were. Nice and straight. You want to make sure you keep this nice and firm, because if you just start tightening the back without holding the shutoff valve, you'll just probably break the fitting on the back side. Okay, that's probably plenty. Same idea. Put that nut off there. Hands of trash, and always close this. Okay, and that's pretty much just how you change them out. When you're done changing them out, I would suggest just doing on ones in one room at a time. If you're doing multiple bathrooms, just do them in about one room at a time, okay? So you've got these, and I'll go ahead and do this toilet. And then after that, make sure you have a buddy, and you guys have a walkie-talkie or some kind of whistle or screaming system where they'll go down, turn the water on, you'll stay up here, make sure that there's no leaks. If there's any leaks, they'll always come back here. They shouldn't be drastic. If you've tightened them up at all, they won't be drastic, but you'll see that there's some leaks back here. If it seems like you've turned it as tight as you can and you're still getting leaks, it's a possibility that maybe the pipe is dented or you didn't get it as clean as you needed to. And also a possibility you might just need to tighten it some more. If you need to tighten it some more, take the nut back off, put a little bit of some pipe dope on those threads, and that'll allow it, some thread seal, that'll allow a little bit of lubrication to tighten a little bit more and give you a little bit better seal. Just make sure they're off when you turn the water back on. Also, when you hook up your faucet, another little tip is there's a little filter on the end of your faucet. Make sure you remove that when you're first putting this back on, because you could have all this gunk and pipe thread sealant, you could have solder, you could have dust in that pipe. You don't want it to get caught in that screen, so make sure you turn that screen off as soon as you first try your faucet, if you've just changed your valves out, or just whenever you put a new faucet in. So that's pretty much it. Alright, so I hope you guys liked this video, and if you did, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, and if you want to see some more videos, or if you want to be notified, just subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for notifications, and we'll let you know whenever we post a new video. Hopefully it's something that's helpful and something you can learn from. My name's Cameron, and this is Remodeling America.